and I'll be laying out my views at the top of the show in my daily digest. Should smaller right-wing parties like UKIP and Reform unite to offer a robust alternative to voters? We'll speak to UKIP's brand new deputy leader, Rebecca Jane. Plus, there's no holds-barred opinion from my superstar panel, reacting to the big stories of the day and tomorrow's papers. Christine Hamilton, Calvin Robinson and Rebecca Reed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, with me, Mark Dolan. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
The country is at a crossroads. What do we really think about the highest tax burden since 1950? How does this impact local communities? Where does the national economic debate go from here? I'm going to start off in Deal in Kent this Thursday, the 20th of October. To give us your view on where this debate should go, go to gbnews.uk and join me on the People's Forum.
Hey, welcome along to the Mark Steyn Show. We have a jam-packed show for you. Oh, not just jam-packed, anybody can do that, but ours is thick-cut, tangy marmalade. What pack? Yeah, that's more like it right there. No, a bit tangier than that. That's how I like it. We'll talk bent coppers with Palm Sandu. And Dominique Samuels is here. We have bent boatmen in the English Channel working as the business partners of human traffickers and sex slavers and body part harvesters. There are grim consequences to our borderless world. Do you like the net zero? Do you think abolishing the internal combustion engine in 2030 is too little too late? Do you think when the RNLI drops them off at Dover that Ahmed and Yusuf should be issued with their own electric golf buggy to go check out the local primary school? Well, the Green Davos Conference booked a dynamite denier double act, Marano and Monckton. And just at the thought of that, the Tory climate minister fled in terror. Mr. Marano and Viscount Monckton will join us to talk about why the climate minister is so frit, as Mrs. Thatcher used to say. Lots of talk these past 3 years about the COVID death toll, but a lot of other things have died in Westminster just this last week. Fracking, energy independence, maybe even democracy and liberty. Lois Perry is here to open up with both barrels, and you won't want to miss that. Grab yourself a cuppa or a snifter. According to Taste, it's all coming your way after Polly Middlehurst with the latest news. All yours, Polly.
Mark, thank you. And the top stories this evening. Cabinet ministers were told today they need to save taxpayers' money, but that public spending should continue to rise overall. Ministers left Downing Street this morning after the new Chancellor told them their budgets needed to be pared back. Jeremy Hunt said savings should focus on areas which would not affect public services. Public spending currently stands at around £1 trillion annually. And Downing Street has hinted it may have to drop its commitment to the pensions triple lock as Whitehall attempts to find those savings. The Prime Minister had previously committed to pensions seeing either an increase equal to the rate of inflation or wages, whichever was the highest. And it comes as a new poll suggests the Prime Minister must face up to resigning. YouGov research shows more than half of Tory members want Liz Truss to leave Downing Street. British households are being warned to prepare for blackouts and maybe cold homes this new year. The National Grid's chief executive says the power cuts could potentially happen on really cold weekdays in January and February between 4 and 7 p.m. John Pettigrew was issuing his blackout warnings during the FT's Energy Transition Summit as he outlined what might happen if generators fail to secure enough gas from Europe to meet UK demand. The RMT, the rail union, have announced 3 further days of strike action for next month. Union members at Network Rail and 15 other train companies will all walk out on the 3rd, the 5th and the 7th of November. The announcement comes after the RMT said Network Rail did a U-turn on their agreed pay offer and better working conditions. The US president has promised to write abortion rights into law in January if the Democrats keep control of the Congress after the midterms. Joe Biden is rallying the party itself and its supporters around the issue of abortion. This comes after the option for a woman to terminate a pregnancy was sharply cut back by the Supreme Court's decision to overturn the Roe v. Wade ruling, which used to protect the right to an abortion in the United States.
The promise I make to you and the American people. The first bill that I will send to the Congress will be to codify Roe v. Wade. And when Congress passes it, I'll sign it in January, 50 years after Roe was first decided the law of the land.
And lastly, auctioneers in Edinburgh say they are flabbergasted. That's the word they use, by huge interest being shown in a print reproduction of Balmoral Castle painted by none other than the King himself. His Majesty's prints usually selling for around £400 to £600. But this particular painting from 2001 has sparked international interest and is expected to fetch much, much more. It's thought to be the first time that a print by a reigning monarch has been auctioned, and the bidding opens on Thursday. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, and now it's time for Mark Steyn.
Yeah, these days I'm pretty flabbergasted too, Polly. That's a word we should use more often. What was that? Blackouts between 4 and 7 o'clock? Introduced by the head guy of the National Grid at a transitioning conference. I think that's rubbish about transitioning to net zero or renewables or whatever it is. But what seems to be obvious when you've got blackouts between 4 and 7 p.m. in the dead of winter is that you're actually transitioning out of the developed world, which seems to be what's happening here. A Tory optimist is someone who thinks the party is heading for a 1997 scale defeat. A Tory pessimist, actually a Tory realist, is someone who thinks the party is heading for a 1993 scale defeat when Canada's Tory government was reduced to just 2 seats. It won't be 2, don't worry, might be 7 seats, 12 maybe, but it will be catastrophe and wholly self-inflicted. Here's the latest polling showing Labour, look at this, with a majority of 364. That's not the number of seats, by the way, that's the majority. The number of seats would be 507 Labour MPs out of 650, which leaves 143 seats to be divided up between all the fringe parties, the Shinners, Plaid Cymru, etc., and the Conservatives. If this poll were to prove true, the Tories wouldn't even be the official opposition. That would be the Scottish National Party. That's very Canadian too. In 1993, the Tories so screwed themselves that the Quebec Secessionist Party became Her Majesty's loyal opposition. That's them in number 2 position there, 54 seats. And if you're wondering, wait a minute, a secessionist party is the loyal opposition, bingo! They weren't in the least bit loyal to Her Majesty. They didn't recognise her as Queen of Canada because they didn't recognise Canada as the country they were in. And so it will be on that day when the SNP takes over as His Majesty's loyal opposition. So these useless, hollow, unprincipled, nothing husks heading for one almighty rendezvous with destiny, and one regrets it mainly because Sir Neil's a lot and the ginger growler will be even worse. And actually, with a 364-seat Labour majority and the SNP as the opposition, there is literally nothing those guys couldn't do. And yet, there is one thing the ghastly, unprincipled Tories could do that would win them the election and save their seats both in the Red Wall and the Leafy Shires, and that is, it's a simple thing. It's one simple thing, and it doesn't involve the economy or price caps or any of that, because basically that's too complex for these guys to fix now. So this is simple. To end decisively the nightly migrant invasion on the southern shore. Oh, no, we would do it if we could, but it's all very complicated and legalistic. Really? As we've seen over the last 2.5 years, it's not in the least bit complicated when they want to do it to you. You can't take off for a week on the Costa if they so decide, but Ahmed from Jalalabad can stroll in and be put up in a luxurious country house hotel, such as Dunchurch Park, near Rugby, Warwickshire, very leafy. Look at that, lovely. And as part of his holiday package, Ahmed gets not just afternoon tea, but also 2 complimentary GP visits a week. If you're a citizen of the United Kingdom and you're unfamiliar with the term GP, don't worry your pretty little head about it, because you're not going to be needing to use the term GP in any foreseeable future. It's strictly for Ahmed and Bashir. So the British state can do it to you, as it demonstrated effortlessly throughout 2020. It can fine you for sitting on a bench in a public park. It can cancel your Christmas observances. It can even order a bloke from Zone 3 not to get his leg over a bird from Zone 2, or whatever Boris's cockamamie bonk-free zone regulations were. It can dictate every aspect of human existence for you, because this pandemic is so serious that the likes of Jeremy Vine, Colossus of Radio 2 and whatever that TV channel is, Jeremy Vine is already pillow munching for the next wave.
Sore throat, headache, cough, aches and pains, and a Joy Division t-shirt. So I'm in bed with COVID.
Oh, I'm in bed. Oh, I'm in bed with it, with COVID. Lock down the nation. Is my croak sounding croaky enough? Lock down the nation now. Compulsory pillow munching for the next fortnight. But lock down the nation's borders? Oh, don't even think about it. Under these horrible, hollow, pseudo-conservatives, the institutions of the British state now work for everyone but the British people. The border force does not enforce the border, but facilitates its disintegration daily. The Royal National Lifeboat Institution, for 2 centuries, a respected charitable institution, very courageous in the waters around the British Isles, instead now runs an express nightly shuttle from French waters to the English coast for 1,000 strapping young men a night. These organisations, Border Force, RNLI, the Home Office, are making the job of the human traffickers easier and far more profitable. They are, in effect, the business partners of the human traffickers, the sex slavers, the drug gangs. Yesterday on this show, our friend Ava Vlaardinga brought up the case of a 12-year-old Parisian girl, Lola David. There she is, a little 12-year-old girl, a child. And when I say the case of Lola David, I mean case literally. What was left of her was found stuffed in a suitcase. She had been raped, tortured, killed, and the imprinting of numbers on her corpse suggests her body parts were being harvested for sale. Nobody cares any more than they care about the young girls gang raped in Telford and Rotherham and Oldham and your town here, or the 11-year-old unaccompanied minors who mysteriously go missing from migrant hotels. So the Border Force and the RNLI ferry in unaccompanied minors in order to ensure the smoother flow of the child prostitution racket and the body parts market. As David Starkey said yesterday, these gruesome remnants of a once great political party who believe in nothing are hardly worth talking about. But you Tory guys want to save your worthless skins, don't you? Then end this. End this. Not for the boys and girls. I don't suppose you care about them one way or the other any more than you care about the girls in Rotherham and Oldham and all the other towns. But do it to save yourselves. It's an emergency, just like the big scary bat out of Wuhan that meant you could arrest people because they went to a Costa that was not the closest one to their home. That's a great law, isn't it? And very compatible with English liberty. So if you could do that, why don't you pull out of the European Court of Human Rights and take emergency measures on this? And it might be enough to save you from a 1993 Canadian wipeout that you useless tossers from top to toe thoroughly deserve. Let me know what you think. gbviews at gbnews.uk. Dominique Samuels is here. And Dominique, you are very outspoken on the immigration issue. And it's always interesting to me then to read the fellas who reply to you, because on both, neither the left nor the establishment right seems keen to talk about this issue.
Yeah, I completely agree. Firstly, thanks for having me on your show. But whenever I do speak about these issues, the issue of immigration, and for me, you know, the illegal invasion that's currently going on is just one part of a really concerning story that's happening all over Europe. There's also the issue of legal immigration as well. But whenever I do say any of these things, I'm attacked and told that, you know, you're an immigrant, so why are you saying these things? You know, you're not white, you don't look British, you and your family need to go back to wherever you came from. And look, at the end of the day, I'm not an immigrant, my parents weren't immigrants, I'm mixed race, I'm British, I was born here, and regardless, even if I was an immigrant, there are millions of, you know, British ethnic minorities and people of mixed heritage that don't want open borders, because what do you see? We've seen the result of open borders, not just in Britain, but in the rest of Europe. You get cultural decay. You get the issue of gang rapes of young children. You get to the point where there's sort of no communal ties that we have in this country anymore, because they have been eroded by mass migration. And you don't have to be some far-right racist to recognise that reality. I've lived in areas where I've seen the demographic change. You know, it's been really radical. And there are certain parts of this country that are completely unrecognisable. And I think, you know, people should be able to tell the truth about that.
No, and and the racism, if anything, is from these people who say, well, just because you have black, brown, yellow skin, because your grandparents came from the British West Indies or British West Africa, you should be in favour of absolute open borders and anybody just walking into the country. If that isn't racial condescension, I don't know what is.
It is, because it's basically saying that we're literally all the same. It doesn't matter what shade you are. It doesn't matter what country you come from. It doesn't matter the culture. It doesn't matter the cultural ties between Jamaica and the UK, which is why people from the West Indies were asked to come here, which is why my granddad came here when he was 9 years old, legally invited. That's a very big difference. And they assume that we're literally all the same. I have nothing in common with someone coming over in a dinghy from North Africa, and it's not racist to make that assertion. It's simply reality. And if we want to play the race card, which I'm very, very happy to do, I could easily say that large swathes of people from the Middle East and North Africa have extremely racist and archaic views towards black people. So I could say I don't want them here because they are pretty racist. A lot of racism I've actually received have been from people from these backgrounds. I could easily pull that card.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt. You can spend 20 minutes in Libya or Saudi Arabia or the Palestinian territories, and the things you'll hear about black people are really quite astonishing. What prompted my thoughts on this was this terrible murder of this poor 12-year-old girl in Paris that you tweeted about. And I saw just before I came on air from Senator Stéphane Ravier, who represents Les Bouches-du-Rhône, which I think is down around Marseille and just north of there in the French National Assembly. And he says very powerfully, let me see if I can translate this, our youth are being massacred our youth are being massacred while professional mourners chase an imaginary Islamophobia. And then he criticised Monsieur Macron, the French president, for saying pas un mot pour Lola, not a word about Lola. There's something weird, isn't there, when these terrible things happen to the most vulnerable members of French society or British society, and the whole attitude of the establishment is just to pretend there's no bigger picture to see here.
Because it's very, very easy to ignore, because we can all see what the problem is. And it's the issue of asylum seekers, of migrants from these countries coming over here and committing crimes. And look, this is not to say that migrants are the only ones that commit every single crime. You know, of course there are people that commit depraved crimes that are native to Britain, that are native to France. But my point would be, why would you willingly import more of a possible problem when you know there are people already in your country that are committing these sorts of depraved crimes? Surely you'd want to deal with the people already in your country before inviting people over that have vastly different attitudes towards women, vastly different attitudes towards sexual consent, and just vastly different attitudes culturally in general. Why would you want to import more of that problem, knowing that you open up children and women to that risk? And, you know, let's not pretend that an influx of migration in Europe hasn't been associated with higher levels of rape and sexual assault. We saw it in Germany, we saw it in Sweden, we've seen people being beheaded for insulting the Prophet Muhammad in France. Let's stop pretending this isn't a problem, because it does exist. And the grooming gangs in the UK as well.
Now you make a simple but devastating point there that I've never heard anybody come back on, which is that every society, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about the UK or France or Tajikistan or wherever, has its share of murderers and rapists and other criminals. So there is absolutely no point. That's bad enough. There's no point then to importing more of them. And yet we have I mean, it's simple, but nobody has an answer to that. And at a time when everybody has to jump through hoops just to live ordinary life, why then, at a time of pandemic, do we let people just walk into the country on the southern shore?
And not even just, you know, walking into the country. They're essentially, you know, being welcomed in, being given hotel rooms, being given free food, free NHS, the lot. Meanwhile, Brits are set to starve in the UK. I mean, 5 million a day minimum that we're actually spending on this problem, whilst we're expected to make constant sacrifices in this country. And, you know, let's also stop pretending that all of the people coming in here are budding doctors and lawyers. They're not. The likelihood is these will be people that take up low-skilled jobs. Now, there's a skills crisis in this country. There are plenty of British people born here, that's nothing to do with skin colour, even if you're not born here, British citizens that can do those jobs. So I honestly don't understand the point of this. It's basically an invasion in the name of what? In the name of open borders, something we're supposed to be against, at least the Conservative Party is.
Yeah, do you know why the Conservatives just don't drive a stake through this thing? It's arisen on their watch. Why don't they deal with it?
I think they're scared. I mean, we saw what happened when, Liz Truss, I think she's a disaster, but we saw what happened when Liz Truss tried to push against the orthodoxy. If we left any sort of convention, we'd be under attack globally. Even Joe Biden's been piping up about Liz Truss's economic policies. Imagine if we left European conventions of human rights, there'd be absolute uproar. And I just don't think the Tories are prepared to fight that fight. They're just not. And as a result, they will lose the next election, period.
Golly, Dominique, it's almost like this whole democracy thing is just a sham. It's a dangerously bad lesson to teach the electorate because it doesn't leave them much options beyond violent revolution. Thank you very much, Dominique. Oh, by the way, if you're watching from Ofcom, I'm not advocating violent revolution. I'm not fomenting violent revolution, but I'm just putting it out there as a thought. Great to see you, Dominique. Coming up, we're going to get to your comments, gbviews at gbnews.uk. And bent coppers, they're everywhere. Who says so? The head man at Scotland Yard. We'll talk about that with Palm Sandhu. And the end of UK energy independence with Lois Perry. She's going to be here in a minute. And the bad boys of climate. What a double act. Mark Morano and Viscount Monkton. They're here for some double denier dynamite. Don't touch that dial. You never know what horrors are lurking on some of these other channels. We'll see you in a minute.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
GB News is the People's Channel, so let's channel what the people are saying. We wanted to know about whether the horrible murder of 12-year-old Lola in Paris is the price we pay for so-called multiculturalism. Norby said, wasn't it T.S. Eliot who said, humankind cannot bear very much reality? Yeah, he did in... whatever it was, the Four Quartets, I think he said that in. And he's quite right. Right now, the majority of the citizens of Western nations are still overly invested in illusion. And it is too disillusioning to comprehend the reality that they have brought, and they and their leaders have brought upon themselves. A gentler kind of revenge says, how is this a cultural issue and not one of horrendous individual criminality? A Twitter user says, can someone explain to me the purpose of multiculturalism? And David, well, I tell you what, let's go back to that gentler kind of revenge one. How is this a cultural issue and not one of horrendous individual criminality? Because when it happens, and this is the, I think, the 12th young girl to be so murdered in France, then you're talking about a cultural fault line. I spent some time actually in Stavanger in Norway, sitting in on classes in which a lovely Norwegian lady, they'd had this cultural fault line, they'd had a lot of Afghans in whose courtship rituals were a bit brusque from the point of view of the local girls. So instead of inviting them out to a candlelight dinner, soft music playing in the background, they would just grab the girl and drag her into the shrubbery. So this Norwegian lady was trying to teach them about Western courtship rituals. So that's how it becomes a cultural issue, clever clogs, when you get sufficient of it, like, here's another one from David. No, you're blaming immigration when you should be blaming murderers and rapists. It makes it appear correctly, in my opinion, that you're far more bothered by where they came from than you are about what they did. Actually, I'm the only guy on this wretched, corrupt British media who has actually said what happened to that poor girl. 2 nights running now, she's chopped up and left in a suitcase, what remains of her. She's been raped and tortured, obviously, and her body parts are imprinted with numbers that suggest better body parts had already been sold on. So you're not going to even hear about this story, about, quote, what they did. Last week, we actually read out the names of the 24 people who are charged in the rape of one 13-year-old girl in Bradford. 24 names. One of them was an English name, one of them was an Italian name, 92% came from a certain other community. And we're all so sensitive to where they came from rather than what they did, that no one ever talks about it. You should read the reports here. You should actually get off your flabby, white, privileged arse, David, and read some of these 1,000-page reports from every town up and down the land, in which they all reach the same conclusion, that because of racial, religious sensitivities, none of the police, the bureaucrats, the politicians in Bradford, Rotherham, Oldham, Oxford, Aylesbury, even honestly discuss what's going on. Okay, we'll have more of your conversational points in Stump the Steyn later on. As you may recall, the Daily Star is wondering whether Liz Truss will outlast a head of lettuce. That's the lettuce on the right, and that's Liz Truss on the left. And I have to say, to be honest, the lettuce actually looks in better shape than Liz does these days. But whatever you think of Liz Truss, the Tory membership voted for her, and to have buyer's remorse a few weeks later and let MPs decide isn't exactly how things are supposed to work. Lois Perry pointed out on Twitter yesterday that this is much larger than the regular political horse racing here. It's a signal that democracy itself is no longer functioning. Lois Perry of car26.org joins me now. Lois, you actually voted for Liz Truss, and rather enthusiastically, because you liked all the return of fracking and all that kind of thing. You must be devastated at the way she's now just been taken hostage and is being held incommunicado in Downing Street.
Well, no, absolutely. And I just want to say this to my fellow countrymen. Democracy is dead. Your democratically elected government has been overthrown, and in its place it has been put globalist, technocratic stooges. You have no rights. We're going to have digital ID. Your children are not going to be in your control. You're not going to be able to own a car. You're not going to be able to own your own home. You will own nothing and you will be happy. Jeremy Hunt is married to a woman that works for the Chinese state government broadcaster. This is absolutely horrific. Everything has gone. Zero liberty, zero freedom of speech and zero democracy. The British public needs to know what's happening right now. It's incredible what's happening right now.
It's funny the way it all comes back to China. You know, as you say, Mrs. Hunt is basically on the Chinese Communist Party payroll for that television gig she has. Joe Biden is basically on the take from the Chinese Communist Party. Justin Trudeau is on the take from the Chinese Communist Party. You go down the list to Barbados and the Solomon Islands, and they're on the take from the Chinese Communist Party. How long can this go on before people wake up?
People do need to wake up. The government that we voted in has been overthrown not once but twice. Boris Johnson, for all his faults, won a majority of 80 seats. He was thrown out because he wasn't doing as he was told all the time. Now Liz Truss, she was put in. I did support her. I'm absolutely devastated about what's happened to her. She looks haunted, and the look in her eyes should be the look in everyone's eyes at the moment, because we have not got democracy. When you've got Jeremy Hunt, the de facto leader of the Tories, and then you've got Keir Starmer, who are both in the pockets of the technocratic globalists, there's no democracy. We have been taken over, not by troops on the ground, but insidiously by sleeper agents that have been placed in our government. And yeah, you're right, the British public does need to wake up.
If you were to take a less pessimistic view of it, Lois, you're all big on the fracking and energy independence, and you have all the facts and figures at your command. You basically beat up that chap we put you on telly with a couple of weeks ago, who was all worried about why we didn't. Why, I know, you were very good at it, because you've got the facts and the figures, and if you're discussing it as a matter of energy independence, it's fine. But isn't the truth that for, like a lot of these things, it's a social issue as much as immigration and multiculturalism are, that you're up against the social attitudes of Conservative and Labour and Liberal politicians, even Sinn Féin, who are so crazy and pointless now. They want to leave the entirely dysfunctional United Kingdom to set up a country that's just exactly the same, only likely even more dysfunctional. All these people all know each other and they all agree on all this stuff. It's very weird.
It is very weird, because the thing is, he who controls the energy and the food production controls absolutely everything. And it's very interesting. There was an article in the Man Online today that said that the very families who benefit the most, or have historically benefited the most from oil and gas, so that's what's made them rich, are the people paying these nut jobs $25,000 a year, 25 grand a year, to actually do Just Stop Oil protests. Why? Because if you limit the supply, then you push the price up, and then our desire, our need for oil and gas is not going down. If anything, it's going up, because renewables are a completely fake joke. So they're just pushing the price up, and you know, it's disgusting, but people need to know what's actually going on. And Jeremy Hunt making it only 6 months, helping people with their energy bills, and then making it targeted. Targeted to whom? How much do you need to have or not have? And I tell you what, these people don't want private enterprise either. And 90% of the businesses in this country are family owned. If there's no jobs, guess what? We have to get our money from the government. Guess what? It's all going to be digital. And if you're not a good girl and boy, you're not going to be able to spend your money like Trudeau and the truckers. But this is the future right now with what's happening today.
Oh, yeah, they're building it. I mean, the fact is, a bad winter, as they see it, is good news for them, because once the grannies start freezing to death, it's going to be an argument for an even bigger state and more government intervention. It's a terrible thing, Lois, and as we just said, it's not a good thing to teach the people that there is no, you can vote for a policy program, but once in office, that policy program gets tossed out the window. That's not a good lesson to teach people.
No,
Thank you very much, Lois. Always good to see you. Thank you. She's good on this stuff, and she's not wrong, and that's the trouble. This is nothing to do with the way a parliamentary democracy should be governed. Britain is the land, of course, where everything is policed except crime. If your car's broken into, there's not a copper to be found. But if you misgender someone on Twitter, a 6-man social media SWAT team will be at your door in minutes, just like that fella there. The public tends to assume that when you call 999 and get redirected to the answering machine at the Central Customer Service Centre on Rock Hall, it's because the constabulary are off doing their beloved precision Macarena routine at the Lincolnshire Pride Parade or the Ballymena Ramadan Festival. But a new report into the Metropolitan Police... There they are. God. Why don't you try doing a dance that requires some skill? Any chance of a paso doble? A tango? Foxtrot even, you useless... Anyway, a new report into the Metropolitan Police by Baroness Casey suggests that the officers may simply be too busy committing crimes of their own. Her first case study in this report is of an officer who is investigated because of an accusation of assault. That's a serious crime. Another 10 misconduct cases are then opened against him for things like more assault, for fraud, sexual harassment, sexual assault. The 11th case leads to his arrest. The first case is substantiated, and yet that officer is still serving with the Met today. The new commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, says there are hundreds of officers who should be sacked. With me now is former Chief Superintendent at Scotland Yard, Parm Sandhu. Parm, you've spoken to us before about events going on in just one individual London police station. Was anything in this report a surprise to you?
None of it is a surprise. It's been going on for years, and we've talked about it for years. And one of the biggest problems reading the report is that the misconduct process that the Metropolitan Police has is not fit for purpose. It doesn't actually deal with those officers. And the case studies that you've just mentioned, that one of the reasons that one of those officers got 11 misconduct cases against him was because it takes between 18 months and 2 years for an investigation to be completed. Now, if you get an allegation today, you've still got another 2 years where you can rack up those. It's like traffic offences, and you can just rack them up. And even at the end of it, about 60% of those cases are not found, so there's no case to answer. And that the chances of actually getting somebody convicted or found against them is pretty small. It's about 33%, I think.
No, and we all know that that's not because they're actually working on that investigation for 18 months or 2 years. You know, they're working on it for the minimal time it takes, and then they're just spending another 18 months dragging the thing out for no particular reason. So it seems an entirely dysfunctional system, and it does, like in cases we know about in London, you know, you can wind up getting murdered because a man without the obvious police temperament has been sort of allowed to stay on.
Absolutely. And what really worries me most is that Sir Mark Rowley's response to this is to take 100 detectives off the streets and now put them into misconduct investigations. So he's created an anti-corruption unit, which means that when you're talking about burglaries or you're talking about some sort of theft and police officers aren't there to deal with it, that's because they're investigating each other. And that isn't the answer. That's not the right way. And in my view, if you want my view, is that all of these misconduct cases, all of these allegations should be taken away from the police. They shouldn't be marking their own homework. They shouldn't be investigating their mates today that they were working with yesterday. It should be completely out of their hands and somebody else look at it.
What would you be I mean, we've had situations, I think, in various... You know, I think in the Turks and Caicos, when there was a problem with corruption here, they fly in London, someone from London. Would you be in favour of a chief constable from Australia or New Zealand flying in to look at it, an outside eye, or should it actually be a non-police person?
I don't think it needs to be a police person, because most of these issues, they start off as HR type issues. And in Dame Louise Casey's report, she actually says there's minimal involvement from the HR teams. So if they got, the lower case ones, maybe they wouldn't be escalated. Maybe that officer wouldn't be allowed to get away with so much because HR have already dispensed of that individual services. But what's happening is, instead of HR, you're taking good detectives off the streets who want to be there, who want to be serving the public. And instead, you could be working with a group of people today, and the next day you're on this DPS, ACC, or whatever they want to call them, and you're investigating those same people that you worked with the day before. And the conviction rate is absolutely appalling, really, really low.
No. And absolutely crazy, as you say, to take 100 detectives off. That's 100. We're not even talking, not even detectives. You don't see any policemen on the streets anymore. But when you call them, there's going to be 100 fewer because the answering machine in Rock Hall will now be redirected to the backup answering machine in the South Sandwich Islands. That's the state of British policing. Thank you very much, Palm. We always appreciate your insight on this. Lovely to see you. Stump the Steyn looms. Ask me anything. GBViews@gbnews.uk. We'll talk big climate and the big shut-up when we return with Mark Morano and Viscount Monkton. That's straight ahead.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens,
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
If you were watching telly in the 70s, you'll surely remember the Persuaders. Tony Curtis played a streetwise tough from the slums of Brooklyn, and Roger Moore played a high-toned British aristocrat. Well, this week's Green Davos conference in London decided to revive the concept. Mark Morano is a roughneck from the mean streets of America's urban hell, and Viscount Monkton is an upscale Brit toff from the grouse moors. And together, the climate change alarmists booked them as a dynamite denier double act to see whether they could prove effective persuaders of all the global warming hysterics who think the world's going to end. So unlike the usual climate change narcolepsy palousas of COP26 and the like, it promised to be a vaguely non-coma inducing event. Alas, the so-called Minister of State for the Climate, a chap called Graham Stewart, wasn't so thrilled. The minute he heard Morano and Monkton were there, he said, "Whoa, I'm out of here." And he fled the scene. Lord Monkton and Mr. Morano join us now. How did things go at the Green Davos, Christopher?
Well, it was wonderful because we were told in advance by the organiser that the only reason he had asked us there was so that all the true believers in the new religion could tell us how wrong we were and how sinful we were, and we were all going to go to hell. But when we had a debate, Mark and I, against two of these kind of Club of Rome types, one of them actually was at the Club of Rome and also chaired the first 3 conferences of the states parties to the coma-inducing climate change convention, or whatever it's called. We had such a good debate that the audience voted that it should be extended by 50% so that they could hear more of it. And afterwards, several of the people there who were all pretending to be true believers, because you have to these days or you get your reputations trashed by the climate communists. Instead, they were all coming up saying, actually, privately, we agree with you absolutely. And we've got all sorts of ideas about how to put a stop to this nonsense. So what is interesting is that the cracks are beginning to show in the apparent unity of the true believers. And that is why there was such hysteria in the Daily Cabbage, or whatever it's called in the States, and there's another thing called the Smug Blog, I think it's called. And they were both very angry with us for going, and they described us as all sorts of rude names, and we were even called liars. And yet we were the only people in the debate who actually gave facts, quoted scientific papers, statistics, the lot. The other side were wholly unable to do this. And science, of course, is an inescapably quantitative process, but all these people are actually men of religion, effectively. It's a new cult, and it's a zombie cult. They are incapable of thinking, and all you've got, I mean, the platitudes that came about facilitating sustainability agendas across sectoral divides was just yawn-making this morning.
That's always a good one. Mark, were you surprised at the fact that a lot of these people, the people, including some people at this meeting, don't actually seem to have... They're going along with it for social reasons, but they haven't actually bought into the thing as a serious proposition?
Yeah, I was actually quite surprised. First of all, that they invited us. Second of all, that they held strong. I mean, we were attacked in the media as noxious and odious deniers. Now, Christopher and I debated. I wanted to be Mr. Noxious. He wanted to be Mr. Odious. But then we switched back and forth at times. But this is what they withstood. And what was shocking is the audience voted to extend our debate by 15 minutes. And one of the panelists following us on carbon accounting voluntarily gave up his slot so we could go longer because we were such a fan favorite. And afterward, I was approached by people saying, I'm a conservative, I'm a libertarian, but I go along with this. It's more than social acceptance. These are entrepreneurs, these are the investor class, and they are trying to cash in, if you will, on the mandates and subsidies. So they're more than happy to go along with this agenda.
Nobody there was worth less than $1 billion or $2 billion. I mean, these were very, very serious, big international players. And so we gave them a hell of a pasting, and I was also able to do a keynote address separately. And I took them through the elementary economics of climate change, saying, actually, even if the whole world were to try to go to this net zero by 2050, which we can't and won't anyway, but even if you did, then every $1 billion you spend on trying to get there would buy you 1 millionth of a Celsius degree of warming abated. There's no point in doing it. And actually they bought that argument because they were all businessmen, and they suddenly realized they hadn't asked, well, how many candy canes can we get, what it's going to cost, and is the cost per candy cane value for money? Any kid outside a sweetie shop knows to ask those questions. But these numpties hadn't done so. And now they're all coming up saying, we want a copy of that. This is really interesting. And people are asking for confidential meetings. And can I go and brief their managing director? There's a lot of interest. And that's why the left are so desperate, of course, to stifle all debate. Because the moment anyone who has previously believed this religion starts hearing these home truths, these elementary facts of science and economics, they immediately change their view. It was the same. I was in Oxford just last week speaking to the von Mises Society, and he was a great new Austrian school free market economist of the 1920s and so forth. And so they've now set up a society in his honour. They expected half a dozen people to turn up. The room was about 100 people crammed into a room built for 30, and there was standing room only.
Yeah, that's...
And things are beginning to move now.
There's a reason for that, though, isn't there, Mark? Because the one thing about the United States is this issue is roughly divides on a partisan basis.
Yes.
The Democrats are hot for it, the Republicans are cool. Are you surprised to find yourself in a country like the United Kingdom where basically every political party is hot for net zero?
It's always surprised me how Europe, the conservative parties are all in on the climate agenda. At least in America, we have a lot of conservatives who fight this, and the Republicans and conservatives have never accepted this. But what I told this group here today is they need to decouple the idea of technology in terms of improving energy efficiency from the World Economic Forum, Davos, United Nations agenda. I told them point blank that they are collapsing our energy, our transportation with electric gas car bans, our agriculture with meat-eating bans and high-yield agriculture, and our free speech, the UN owning the science. I told them if they actually wanted to get investors and become technologically self-sufficient, they need to break off from the World Economic Forum and the UN and just focus on energy efficiency, new technologies. I don't think they're ready to do that yet, but that was shocking. And by the way, Mark, you'll love this. The speaker before us was from MasterCard, touting their new carbon footprint credit card. It monitors your carbon footprint and cuts off your spending when you hit your CO2 max. This is what MasterCard sends a senior vice president for sustainability out to promote.
Oh, fantastic. So you put your MasterCard, I think you'll use your MasterCard for a week in the Greek islands, and they'll say, sorry, you've only got enough carbon credits for a wet weekend in Bognor. That's brilliant. Brilliant. Christopher, you know a lot of these lunatics in His Majesty's government. Do you think there is any chance of them changing on this stuff?
Well, I know His Majesty, God bless him, and long may he reign, but he has rained on everybody's parade on this global warming thing. The working classes have completely gone off it. I met a wonderful man called Howard Cox the other day, who runs a thing called Fair Fuel UK, which is campaigning to stop the Tory government from crazily abolishing real cars and replacing them with electric buggies by 2030. And the Conservative Party has 160,000 members, and he has 1.7 million, and still the Tories haven't woken up. So, it is very baffling for people like Mark. They come here and they find the supposedly Conservative Party has bought into all this net zero gibberish, and all on the basis of a single 12-slide presentation done by the then idiotic chief science advisor to the government. I've seen the slides for Boris Johnson, who, of course, knew absolutely no science at all, didn't ask any questions, fell asleep halfway through, and ended up waking up saying, I'm now a true believer in the whole global warming nonsense. So we've been stuck with this.
No, that's fantastic. Mark Morano, we should say, is a terrific book on all this stuff and where it's headed, The Great Reset. And we are grateful. Lord Monckton, we are very grateful because I merely had to mention Roger Moore and he turned up in the full 007 dinner jacket. We're going to have to... We are going to have to institute that as a dress code for all shows moving forward. That's what it's going to take, folks.
My name's Bond. James Bond.
Oh, we have Daniel Craig playing Bond as this kind of cranky Essex nightclub bouncer. That never worked. We need to get Lord Monckton as the new Bond. We've solved all the great problems of the world: climate change and the next 007. Thank you very much, Mark Morano. Thank you very much, Christopher Monckton. Great to see you. And do check out Mark's book. Let's stump it out. Sir Percival says, why does the British legal system lack the will to jail all the Just Stop Oil protesters who block our streets? The Highways Act 1980 says any person who willfully... Here's the answer. They're on the same side. The police and the judges agree with these guys. John says, the doctor says, why do you think Tyson Curtin won't team up with UKIP and Reclaim? Should Farage take over? Listen, We need an alternative to the Tories. They're headed for a Canadian election defeat. We might as well get a new right-wing party out of it. That will do it. I don't know where Mark Dolan has gone to. I've just been warming up the old moniker for him because it's a 2-Mark Tuesday on GB News. But the numero uno Marco, Mark Dolan, is coming up after the weather. Stay safe, stay free.
Evening, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. After most of us had a fine day today, the rest of the week looks a lot more mixed. There'll be gusty winds, we'll see some heavy showers, but it's always staying on the mild side. That's because the air is coming up from the south, and this area of low pressure will be churning up that southerly air, but also bringing weather fronts which will bring cloud and some outbreaks of rain. This first one spreading some showery rain into southwest England this evening, up into parts of South Wales, some heavy bursts of rain possible here, and by the end of the night getting up towards Northern Ireland. Away from these areas, though, most places, again, will be dry. A coolish night, but not as cold as last night for northern England, southern Scotland. A little colder compared to last night across northern Scotland. There will be a bit of a breeze, which will continue to strengthen during Wednesday. In fact, getting very gusty on Wednesday over southwest England and Wales, with further outbreaks of rain, certainly in the morning. A wet start, too, for Northern Ireland. And we'll see some heavy showers over parts of the Midlands and spread up into northwest England by the end of the day. Away from the west, though, most places across eastern England, much of Scotland will be dry and fine. A bit of a breeze picking up on the east coast, making it feel a little fresher, but in the south, temperatures again could get into the high teens. More heavy showers to come, though, during Wednesday evening, and rain again concentrated through parts of Wales, West Midlands and Northern Ireland. Some really quite heavy bursts of rain accompanied by gusty winds, which will bring a wet start to Scotland on Thursday. That rain will slowly head north. Could easily see a few showers by this stage coming into East Anglia and the south east of England during Thursday. But further west, it's looking much drier on Thursday, much brighter for Wales and Northern Ireland. The winds will be lighter as well, and it's still going to be mild. In fact, really quite mild. Certainly a warmer day for Scotland and Northern England, 14 or 15. Further south, the high teens are likely, but that low is still close by, and it is then likely to throw more showers across the country on Friday.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.